The year is 1953. Buick debuts its all-new overhead valve pushrod V8 design, the Fireball V8. It would replace the outgoing overhead valve inline straight 8. This engine would eventually be known as the Nailhead by enthusiasts. In this episode, we will cover both the first generation and second generation Nailhead engines. First generation displacements were 264, 322, second generation 364, 401, 425. The nickname Nailhead comes from the unusual vertical alignment of small-sized valves on the intake manifold side, originally called nail valve by hot rodders, because the valves had long stems and small heads, which kind of sort of look like nails. To offset the smaller valve size, they used a more radical camshaft from the factory with greater lift duration. Because the valves hang vertically in a pent head formation, exhaust ports had to do 180-degree bends behind the valve. They combated that with a radical cam from the factory, opening the valves early and very quickly, which overcame most of its limitations. They also used dome pistons for desired compression, forged steel connecting rods, as well as a forged steel crankshaft. This engine was also an over-square engine, meaning more bore than stroke. The unique valve arrangement made for a narrow engine design. These engines were capable of high torque output due to the small diameter intake runners, some exceeding 1 pound per cubic inch, which was a huge deal when this engine came out. This engine design was compact and considered lightweight, weighing around 625 pounds, built of high-quality components. Pent head combustion chambers. The Nailhead V8 used a conventional 90-degree bank angle, fully counterweighted crank, underhand rocker arms. The top of the rocker operates the valve, which is opposite than conventional. Vertical valves and central spark plug location, providing a tiny pent roof chamber. Smaller valves wasn't an oversight but on purpose, and the theory was to have a tighter, more efficient combustion chamber. In other words, these engines don't rev high, but they make unbelievable torque, which is exactly what Buick wanted in their V8 design. Introduced in 1953, 322 cubic inch displacement Nailhead V8, 5.3 liters. It's good for anywhere between 188 horsepower all the way up to 236 horsepower in 1955. Peak horsepower came in the Roadmaster 1955 at 4,600 RPM. It could make anywhere between 300 to 330 pound-feet of torque, or 407 to 447 newton meters at 3,000 RPM, with a bore of 4 inches and a stroke of 3.2 inches. Compression was anywhere between 8.5 to 9 to 1. 5 main bearings. The years that this engine was used was 1953 through 1956. Introduced in 1954 and was used for 54 and 55, 264 cubic inch displacement Nailhead V8, 4.3 liters. It's good for anywhere between 143 to 188 horsepower at 4,800 RPM. Anywhere between 220 to 256 pound-feet, or 347 newton meters at 2,400 RPM, with a bore of 3.625 inches and a stroke of 3.2 inches. Compression was 7.2 to 1, featured 5 main bearings. This engine was only found in the Special Series. In 1956, the Special Series would use the 322 V8, which was previously mentioned. The second generation of the Nailhead was introduced in 1957 and no longer used the Fireball name. The second generation doesn't share many parts with the first generation. Introduced in 1957, 364 cubic inch displacement Nailhead V8, 6 liters. This engine was used between the years of 1957 through 1961. It was good for anywhere between 250 horsepower with a 2-barrel carburetor all the way up to 330 horsepower at 4,600 RPM, 400 pound-feet, or 542 newton meters at 2,400 RPM, with a bore of 4.1 inches and a stroke of 3.4 inches. Compression was 10 to 1, featured 5 main bearings. In 1959, the 364 was enlarged to 401, and it goes by the name of 401, but sometimes you'll also hear it by the name of 400 because GM had some weird rules back in the day with maximum displacement in mid-sized cars. They couldn't exceed 400 cubic inch displacement. This engine is legendary. It could be found in just about everything. It would be easier to list what cars didn't have this engine as an option. Buick would offer the 401 from 1959 through 1966. 401 cubic inch displacement Nailhead V8 6.6 liters. It's good for anywhere between 262 horsepower all the way up to 325, possibly more at 4,600 RPM, 412 to 445 pound-feet, or 559 through 603 Newton meters at 2,400 RPM with a bore of 4.2 inches and a stroke of 3.6 inches. Compression was 10.5 to 1. It's important to note that this and the last contender on our list have a more radical camshaft from the factory, so they are known to have a lumpy idle. Moving on to the largest displacement Nailhead V8, introduced in 1963, and it started out as a Riviera option, but then it became optional on the Wildcat and Electra. 1964 and 65 standard engine on the Riviera, 425 cubic inch displacement Nailhead V8, 7 liters. It's good for anywhere between 325 all the way up to 360 horsepower with the dual quads at 4,400 RPM, 465 pound-feet, or 630 Newton meters at 2,800 RPM with a bore of 4.3 inches and a stroke of 3.6 inches. Compression was 1025 to 1. 5 main bearings. The years this engine was used was between 1963 to 1966. Buick would replace the Nailhead in 1967 by the Buick Big Block. It was offered in 3 displacements, 400, 430, and 455. Offered from 1967 until the early 70s when emissions killed it. But honestly, that's another engine for another day. All right, now it's time for Would You Rather. 2 scenarios today. In the first scenario with the 401 engine, what would you rather have, a 1963 Buick Riviera or 1959 Buick Electra 225 or 1965 Buick Wildcat? I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. Moving on to the second scenario. 1953 Buick Skylark convertible with a 322 V8 or 1965 Buick Riviera GS with the 425 or 1960 Buick Electra with the 401. Going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. Now it's time for Name That Tune. First person to get both the name of band and the song title correctly in the comment section will have a comment pinned to the top of it. What engines would you like to see on Engine Episode Wednesday? Put it in the comments section below. As always, thank you all so much for coming out and watching this. If you'd like to get in touch with me, shoot me a comment in the comment section below. I read and answer all comments posted. I don't say that for self-worth. I just say that if you post a comment, I will read it. We also have a Facebook group that correlates with this YouTube channel. I call it the After Party. It gives you the opportunity to share your ride stories, experiences. Link will definitely be in the description. If you want to send me an email, a more intimate one-on-one conversation, that will also be linked in the description below. Just know I appreciate everything you guys bring. And until next time, toodaloo! They did the mash. It's called the Monster Mash. The Monster Mash. It was a graveyard smash. They did the mash. Caught on with a flash. The Monster Mash.